The notification came at 6:52 on a Sunday morning, just as I was standing in the hotel bathroom trying to scrub off the last traces of makeup from the night before. The wedding had been loud, beautiful, exhausting, the kind of event that leaves glitter in your hair and a headache behind your eyes. Asterisk, my phone buzzed on the marble counter. Asterisk, I almost ignored it. But something about the timing made me pick it up. It was an automated alert from my bank, one of those balance notifications I'd set up months ago for any large transaction. I remember blinking at the screen, still half distracted, expecting maybe a vendor charge or a deposit error. Asterisk instead. I saw a number that didn't make sense. Asterisk $72,884 withdrawn. Asterisk I stared at my reflection for a long moment. My eyeliner was smudged under my eyes, one earring still in, the other missing. For a second, I thought maybe I'd read it wrong, so I checked again. Then again, same number, same zero where my savings should have been. Asterisk. My name is Alina. I'm 30 years old. I work as a physical therapist, and for the last 3 years, I've built my life with careful discipline. Early mornings, double shifts, canceled trips. Every dollar I saved had a purpose. That money wasn't just money. It was a future. Asterisk. A down payment on a small house I'd been dreaming about. Nothing extravagant. Just a quiet place with a front porch and a little bit of space to breathe. Asterisk. And overnight, it was gone. I didn't panic right away. That's the strange part. Asterisk. I just sat on the edge of the bathtub, phone still in my hand, and felt something colder than fear settle in my chest. Not shock. Not even anger. Recognition. Because deep down, there was a part of me that already knew this wasn't random. I called the bank first. The woman on the line was calm, efficient. She confirmed the transfer authorized, completed through a linked account. She said they could open an investigation, place a hold if possible, but it would take time. Asterisk. I wrote everything down. Reference numbers. Case ID. Her name. Asterisk. My hands were steady, even though my thoughts weren't. Asterisk then. I got dressed. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. Asterisk. I went downstairs to the hotel brunch like nothing had happened. Asterisk. Because I already had a feeling about where my money had gone. Asterisk. And I needed to be very sure before I said it out loud to understand what happened. You need to go back 2 days earlier. Friday afternoon. The hotel hallway smelled faintly like fresh flowers and furniture polish, the kind of artificial elegance that tries a little too hard. I was in my room, half dressed, balancing my phone between my shoulder and ear while trying to steam a dress that refused to cooperate. That's when my mother knocked. She didn't wait long before opening the door. She never really had. Asterisk. She stepped inside in a soft lavender dress, already styled for the rehearsal dinner. She looked tired, but composed in that very deliberate way she had mastered over the years. The kind of tired that still expects to be listened to. Asterisk. Do you have a second? She asked, though she was already walking in. I said yes, because of course I did. Asterisk. She sat down on the edge of the chair by the window and gave me a small, tight smile. There's just a tiny situation with the wedding payments, she said. Nothing serious, just timing. Asterisk. I remember pausing, the steamer still humming in my hand. Asterisk. She explained that she and my father were handling several vendor payments directly, and something about their account had gotten temporarily tangled because of a wire transfer issue. The wedding planner, she said, had mixed something up. Funds were moving slower than expected. It all sounded vague, but not impossible. Asterisk. I just need a backup option, she continued, in case something comes up over the weekend. Emergencies, last-minute balances, that sort of thing. I didn't say anything right away, because there was a moment, a very brief one, where something in me tightened, an instinct, a quiet voice reminding me of other times, smaller requests, smaller temporary situations that never quite resolved the way they were supposed to. Asterisk. But then she added, oh, most casually, I already set this up with your sister. It's just practical. Fat mattered more than it should have. Because if Bree had agreed, then it must be normal, right? That's how the logic worked in our family. I told myself I was overthinking. Asterisk. It was a wedding weekend. Stress was high. Things went wrong. People helped each other. That's what families did. Asterisk. Okay, Kay said finally. It took less than 10 minutes. I opened my banking app, followed the steps, added her as a joint user. When the verification code came through, my hands were full, and she said, here, I'll just do it. I handed her my phone. She typed it in herself, smiled, said, this is just temporary, honey. I probably won't even need to touch it. And that was it. No paperwork. No discussion. No boundaries set. Asterisk. Just trust. Handed over in a hotel room while I was distracted and trying to make everything perfect for someone else's big day. Asterisk. Looking back. That was the moment everything shifted. Asterisk. Not Sunday. Morning. Not the notification. Friday, 7 minutes. That's all it took. Asterisk. And at the time, I convinced myself it meant nothing. Asterisk. I was wrong by Sunday morning. The wedding was over. Asterisk. The music had faded. The guests were packing, and the hotel had shifted into that quiet, slightly disorganized calm that comes after something big. People lingered over coffee, retelling moments, holding on to the last pieces of celebration before returning to their normal lives. Asterisk. I walked into the brunch like I belonged there. Asterisk. Like everything was fine. Asterisk. The dining room was bright, filled with soft chatter and clinking glasses. My mother was already seated at the center of a long table, surrounded by relatives. She was laughing, not politely, but easily. Relaxed Dad told me something immediately. She had slept well. I took a seat across from her. Someone passed me a plate. I added food without really looking at it. Eggs, maybe fruit, something toasted. I don't remember eating, only the motion of it. The act of blending in, because I wasn't ready to make a scene. Not yet. Asterisk. I needed to hear it from her. Asterisk. The conversation around the table moved in waves. Stories from the wedding, compliments about the ceremony, small jokes about who danced too much or drank too much. I nodded at the right moments, smiled when expected. Asterisk. But underneath all of it was a steady, quiet focus, waiting. Eventually, the table began to break into smaller conversations. A few people stood up, others leaned away, attention drifting. That's when I looked at her. Can we talk about my account? I said. Asterisk. My voice was calm, low enough that no one else really noticed. She didn't react right away. She lifted her coffee cup first, took a small sip, set it back down carefully. Asterisk. Then, she said, I was going to call you today. There it was. No confusion. No denial. Just timing. The money is gone, I said. Asterisk. All of it. She asked, though her tone suggested she already knew. Asterisk. Yes. Asterisk. She sighed softly, like this was something unfortunate but understandable. Something that required explanation, not apology. Asterisk. Your father is dealing with something serious, she said. I held her gaze. I can see that, I replied. Asterisk. She leaned in slightly, lowering her voice further. The tone shifted, controlled, measured. The way people speak when they believe they're managing a situation rather than being questioned. Asterisk. He borrowed money. She said, borrowed, not lost, not taken, not misused, borrowed from some business associates. She continued. and there's pressure to repay it quickly. Things could escalate if it's not handled. Asterisk. She paused there, letting that word sit between us. Escalate. It was vague on purpose. Asterisk, dangerous enough to feel urgent, but unclear enough to avoid specifics. Asterisk, the money from your account helps stabilize things, she added. It buys time. I stared at her for a moment, trying to align what she was saying with what had actually happened. Asterisk, you took my savings, I said slowly, to fix Dad's problem. She didn't flinch. Instead, she gave a small, almost reassuring nod. Asterisk, you're young, she said. You're doing well. You'll earn it again. Asterisk, and just like that, it was decided, not discussed, not negotiated, decided. I felt something inside me go very still. Asterisk, not anger. Not yet. Something quieter. Something final. Asterisk, the room around us kept moving. Laughter. Plates conversation, but it all felt distant, like it belonged to a different place entirely. I nodded once. I understand, I said. Asterisk, and in that moment, I did not the situation, but her. Asterisk, completely. I didn't argue. Asterisk, that's the part people always expect, that I must have raised my voice, caused a scene, demanded answers right there at the table. I didn't. I sat there for a few seconds after she finished speaking, letting the silence settle. Then I picked up my bag, said a quiet excuse me to no one in particular, and walked out of the dining room. No one stopped me. No one noticed. Asterisk. The hotel lobby was bright with late morning light. People checking out, rolling suitcases across polished floors. I moved through it like I was following a routine I'd practiced before. Asterisk. Out the front doors, dot down the steps, into the parking garage. Asterisk. My rental car was still where I'd left it. Third row. Near the back. I unlocked it, got inside, and closed the door. That's when everything went completely quiet. Not the kind of quiet you hear, the kind you feel. I sat there with my hands resting on the steering wheel, staring straight ahead. My phone was in my lap, screen still lit from the last call with the bank. Asterisk, for a few minutes. I didn't move. Asterisk, I just let the reality settle into something. Solid. $72,000. 3 years of discipline, gone in a single transfer. Not by accident. Not by a stranger. By my own mother. Standing in my hotel room 2 days earlier, asking for a small favor. Asterisk. And the strangest part was this. I wasn't surprised anymore. That initial cold feeling from the bathroom, it had sharpened into clarity. Asterisk, this wasn't new behavior. Asterisk, it was just the first time it had reached this scale. I picked up my phone, and then I started making calls. Asterisk first. The bank again. Asterisk, this time I asked for the fraud department directly. I explained everything, slower, more precise. I emphasized the circumstances, the reason she was added, the context she had given me, the fact that the access had been granted under a specific understanding. They listened, took notes, gave me a case number, said an investigation would begin immediately. But it could take weeks, maybe longer. Asterisk, I wrote everything down in the notes app this time. Names, timestamps, reference IDs. Then I ended the call. Second, I searched for a lawyer. Not someone I knew. Not a family connection. A stranger. I found a local directory, filtered by civil fraud and financial disputes, and started calling offices one by one. Most didn't answer. It was Sunday. One did have an emergency line. I left a message, clear, direct, detailed. My name is Alina. I believe my parents accessed my account under false pretenses and transferred my full savings. I need legal advice as soon as possible. I hung up and exhaled slowly. Then I made a list. It wasn't emotional. It wasn't reactive. It was methodical. Bank followed dash up dot asterisk legal. Consultation, account statements, any documentation I could gather. I stayed in that car for almost 2 hours, not crying, not shaking, just working, because somewhere between the brunch table and that parking garage, something inside me had shifted. I wasn't trying to understand them anymore. I was preparing to hold them accountable. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't asking myself if that was too much. I was asking how far I was willing to go. And the answer was simple. As far as necessary by the time I got back to my room. I wasn't the same person who had walked into that brunch. Something had settled into place. Not anger. Not yet. But direction. I packed slowly, folded my clothes, placed my shoes back into their bags, slipped the dress I'd worn the night before into my suitcase without really looking at it. Everything felt distant, like I was closing out a version of the weekend that no longer mattered. Before leaving, I stopped by the hotel's small business center. It was empty. 2 computers, a printer, and that faint hum of fluorescent lighting. I logged into my bank account and started downloading everything: statements, transaction histories, confirmation details, 3 months worth, then 6. Anything that might matter. I printed copies, organized them into a folder, and added notes in the margins while it was still fresh in my mind. Dates, times, the moment she'd asked, the explanation she'd given. I wasn't guessing anymore. I was documenting. The flight back home Monday morning. I didn't sleep. Most people around me did. Heads leaned against windows. Headphones in, the quiet rhythm of a short flight. I sat upright, my tray table down, going through everything again. Reading, highlighting, thinking. I also sent one message to my sister. It was simple. I'm really happy for you. I hope the honeymoon is everything you wanted. That was it. No mention of the money. No accusation. No weight added to her first days of marriage. Because whatever had happened, it wasn't her fault. And I knew, even then, that I would need to be careful about who I pulled into this when I landed. I went straight home, dropped my suitcase by the door, and sat at my kitchen table with the folder in front of me. That's when my phone rang. Unknown number, I answered. Hi, is this Alina? The voice asked. Yes, this is Patricia Cole. You left a message yesterday regarding a potential fraud case. Her tone was direct, steady, the kind of voice that didn't waste time on unnecessary softness. Yes, I said. Thank you for calling me back. I'd like you to come in tomorrow, she said. Bring everything you have. Documents, timelines, anything you can think of. We'll go through it step by step. There was a pause. Then she added, and Alina, don't speak to your parents about this again until we meet. I looked down at the folder on my table. Okay, I said. After the call ended. I sat there for a while. The apartment was quiet, familiar, safe in a way the hotel hadn't been, even before I knew what had happened. But something about it felt different now, not broken. Just clearer. For 3 years, I had been building something carefully, piece by piece. A life that felt separate from the patterns I grew up with. And in one weekend, that illusion of distance had been tested, but not destroyed. Because this time, I wasn't going to absorb it. I wasn't going to explain it away. And I definitely wasn't going to let it go. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about drawing a line, one that should have been there a long time ago. Asterisk and I had finally decided exactly where it needed to be. Patricia's office was smaller than I expected. Asterisk. Not the kind of place designed to impress, no glass walls or polished branding. Just a quiet suite on the second floor of an older building, with neutral walls and shelves filled with files that looked like they had been used. Not displayed. She greeted me herself. Mid-60s, maybe. Sharp eyes. No wasted movement. The kind of presence that made you feel like she had already decided what mattered and what didn't, and wasn't going to explain it twice. Asterisk. Come in, she said, gesturing toward a chair across from her desk. Asterisk. I sat down and placed my folder in front of me. She didn't touch it right away. Start from the beginning. So I did. The wedding. The conversation in the hotel room. The account access. The transfer. The brunch. Everything. She listened without interrupting for the first 10 minutes. No notes, no reactions. Just attention. That alone felt different. Most people, when you tell them something like this, respond immediately. Shock, sympathy, questions. Patricia didn't. She waited until I finished. Then she reached for a pen. Asterisk. Let's go through the details. She said, asterisk, from that point on. She wrote constantly ... asterisk dates, amounts, exact wording of conversations, timeline of events. Asterisk, she asked precise questions, the kind that forced me to be exact, not emotional. Asterisk, what did she say when she asked for access? Asterisk, did she specify how the account would be used? Asterisk, were there any written messages confirming that explanation? Asterisk, did you give her permission to transfer funds? No, I said. Did she indicate she would? No. Patricia nodded slightly, like she was fitting pieces into something already familiar. Asterisk, good. She said, good. The word caught me off guard. Asterisk, this is not as simple as unauthorized access, she continued. You granted access. That complicates things. I felt something sink in my chest, but she added, without looking up from her notes, access obtained through misrepresentation is still actionable. I leaned forward slightly. What does that mean exactly? Asterisk, it means, she said, finally meeting my eyes. If she asked for access under false pretenses for one purpose and then used it for something entirely different, we can argue fraud. The word landed heavily. Fraud. Not misunderstanding, not family conflict. Fraud. We'll need to prove intent, she continued, that the explanation she gave you was knowingly false at the time, that the transfer was not a last-minute decision, but part of a broader pattern. Pattern? I hadn't thought that far yet. Asterisk to me. It had been one event, one betrayal, but the way she said it made something click. Asterisk, what if it wasn't just this? I asked quietly. Patricia's expression didn't change. Then we find that out, she said. She closed the folder gently. Here's what we're going to do, she continued. You're going to gather more information. Financial history. Any prior transactions. Anything that shows movement of money involving your parents. She slid a notepad toward me with a short list already written on it. And Alina, she added, her tone firm. This is important. You do not confront them. Not yet. Not while we're building this. I nodded, because for the first time since Sunday morning, I felt something shift again. Asterisk, not. Confusion. Not even anger. Control. Asterisk this. Wasn't just something that had happened to me anymore. Asterisk. It was something I could act on. Asterisk, something. That could be examined, documented, and if necessary, taken apart piece by piece, asterisk, as I stood to leave. Patricia added one more thing. Asterisk situations like this rarely exist in isolation, she said. People don't suddenly cross this kind of line for the first time at this scale. I paused at the door. What are you saying? I asked. She gave a small, knowing look. I'm saying, she replied, We're probably just looking at the part that finally reached you. Asterisk, and somehow that was worse because it meant this wasn't the beginning. It was just the moment it became involved. What Patricia said stayed with me. This probably isn't the beginning. At first, I didn't want to believe that. It was easier to think of what happened as a single, desperate decision, something contained, something that could be explained away, even if it couldn't be forgiven. But once the idea was there, I couldn't ignore it. So I started digging. Carefully, quietly. I went through old bank statements first, not just the recent ones, but everything I could access going back years. I wasn't even sure what I was looking for at the beginning. Just movement. Anything that didn't make sense. There were a few things, small transfers I didn't remember authorizing. Old loans I had mentally written off at the time because questioning them had always led to conflict I didn't want to deal with at the time. They had felt like isolated moments. Now they didn't. Now they looked like pieces of something consistent. I made notes, dates, amounts, explanations I'd been given. If I could remember them, then I moved outward. Patricia had suggested I reach out to people carefully, not with accusations, just with questions. People who might have had financial interactions with my father over the years. That part was harder because it meant stepping into conversations I had spent most of my life avoiding. I started with someone safe. An old family acquaintance, someone who had known my parents for years, but wasn't directly involved in our immediate circle. I kept it vague at first, asked if they had ever been involved in any investment opportunities with my dad. There was a pause on the other end of the line, then a cautious, "Why do you ask?" That was the moment I knew. Not everything, but enough. Over the next week, I had 3 more conversations like that, different people. Similar reactions, hesitation, discomfort, careful wording, and then slowly details. Nothing official. Nothing documented in a way that would hold up on its own. But consistent. My father had been asking for money, framing it as short-term investments, real estate opportunities, promises of returns that never quite materialized the way they were supposed to. Some people had gotten small amounts back, just enough to maintain trust. Others hadn't, and most of them hadn't said anything because of embarrassment, because of loyalty, because admitting it out loud would mean acknowledging something they weren't ready to face. One of the names that came up surprised me. My uncle, my father's own brother. I stared at my notes for a long time after that call because it changed the scale of everything. This wasn't just mismanagement. It wasn't even just deception. It was a system. Not necessarily a sophisticated one. Not something planned out in a corporate sense, but a pattern of behavior built over time, taking from one place to cover another, promising returns that depended on the next person saying yes. And when those gaps started to widen, he had come to me, or rather, my mother had, because I was the stable one, the reliable one, the one who had something to take. I sat at my kitchen table that night, looking at the growing list in front of me, names. Amounts. Conversations, and for the first time, the full weight of it hit me. I hadn't just been targeted, I had been included, folded into something that had been happening, long before I knew to look for it. And suddenly, Patricia's words made perfect sense. This wasn't the start. It was just the point where the pattern reached far enough to finally break. The call started a few days after I met with Patricia. At first, I didn't answer. I watched my phone light up on the table, my mother's name appearing again and again like something insistent but predictable. The first time I let it ring out. The second time too. By the third, I turned the phone face down. She left voicemails, 12 of them in the first 2 weeks. I listened to every single one. Not right away, sometimes hours later, sometimes at night when everything was quiet, but I didn't delete them. I needed to hear exactly what she was choosing to say when I wasn't there to respond. The first few were controlled, measured. She said we needed to talk, that there had been a misunderstanding, that I was overreacting and creating unnecessary tension during an already stressful time. By the fourth message, the tone shifted. "You're making this bigger than it needs to be," she said. "We were going to explain everything." By the sixth, the edge was clearer. "I don't understand why you're doing this. After everything we've done for you?" That line stayed with me. Not because it surprised me, because it didn't. It was familiar. Worn in, the same logic that had been used my entire life, just applied to something much bigger now. By the ninth message, the anger had fully surfaced. "You've always been difficult," she said. "Always questioning, always making things harder." "Then they need to be." I paused the voicemail there, not because it hurt more than the others, but because it confirmed something important. This wasn't about the money to her. It was about control, about expectation, about the idea that I was supposed to accept what had happened without pushing back. The last few messages were different, quieter. There was one where her voice sounded tired, almost sad. "Just call me back," she said. "We can fix this." That one was harder to listen to, because there is a part of me, a very old, deeply rooted part, that still responds to that tone. The part that wants to smooth things over, to reduce conflict, to return everything to something that looks like peace. But I didn't call back, not once, because I understood. Now that responding emotionally would only pull me back into the same pattern, and I was already out of it. My father called once. Just once. I answered that one. I don't know why. Maybe curiosity. Maybe a need to hear what he would say when he couldn't rely on my mother to frame the conversation. His voice was calm. "To calm Alina," he said. "I think things have gotten a little out of hand." I didn't respond. "I know you're upset," he continued, "and I understand that. But you need to see the bigger picture here. I've been under a lot of pressure." There it was. Not an apology, an explanation. "I'm going to make it right," he added. "I just need some time." I waited, because sometimes silence forces people to say what they're avoiding. He didn't. He never said he was sorry for taking it. Only that I was upset. Only that he needed time. "I've already taken steps," I said finally, my voice steady. "This isn't a conversation anymore." There was a pause on the line, a long one. Then he exhaled softly. "I think you're making a mistake." He said, "Maybe," I replied, "but it's mine to make." I ended the call, and after that, there was silence. Not complete, the voicemails still came. For a while, but something had shifted. They understood not that I was hurt, but that I wasn't going to come back and negotiate my way out of it. And that silence? It wasn't empty. It was space. The first real space I had ever had to think clearly. Without their voices shaping the outcome by the third week, the situation had moved beyond what I could handle on my own. What started as a single incident, one transfer, one decision, had expanded into something much larger. And the more information I gathered, the clearer it became that this wasn't just about recovering my money. It was about understanding the full scope of what had been happening and deciding what to do with that truth. Bree called me one evening. I almost didn't answer. Not because I didn't want to talk to her, but because I wasn't sure where she stood. In families like ours, lines aren't always clear. Loyalty gets complicated. Silence gets mistaken for agreement. But I picked up. "Hey," she said softly. "Hey." There was a pause. "I need you to tell me everything," she said. So I did. Not rushed. Not emotional. Just facts. What Mom had asked. What I had agreed to. What happened Sunday morning. The investigation. The lawyer. All of it. She didn't interrupt. Didn't question. Just listened. When I finished, the silence on her end stretched longer than I expected. Then she said something that shifted everything again. "Mom asked me to." I sat up straighter. "What do you mean?" "She asked to be added to my account," Bree said. Same explanation. Wedding payments. Backup access. My grip tightened on the phone. Did you do it? No, the word came quickly. I told her I didn't have my phone on me. She continued. Then I kept putting it off. Eventually, she stopped asking. There was another pause, and then, quieter. I should have told you. That was the moment. Something inside me cracked. Not the kind of break that comes with anger. The kind that comes with clarity. Because Bree had seen it, recognized. It protected herself, and I hadn't. Not because I wasn't capable, but because I had still been trying to believe something different. About our family, it's not your fault. I said, I knew something felt off, she replied. I just didn't want to believe it either. That part mattered. More than anything else she could have said, because it meant I wasn't alone in seeing it now. She came to visit that weekend. No big plans. No distractions. Just takeout. Sitting on my couch. Going through everything piece by piece. She told me things I hadn't known. Conversations she had overheard years ago. Times money had moved in ways that didn't make sense. A notebook she once found in Dad's desk. Names, numbers. Amounts that she hadn't understood at the time. Now, it all fit. Not perfectly, but clearly enough. She gave me everything she could remember, every detail. Every moment that had. Felt small at the time, but now carried weight. I added it all to my notes. And when I brought everything back to Patricia, the reaction was immediate. This is bigger than we thought, she said, not alarmed, just certain. The more we document, the stronger your position becomes, she added, and the harder it will be for them to dismiss this as a misunderstanding. That word again, misunderstanding. At this point, it didn't even belong in the same conversation anymore, because the truth had taken shape, and it wasn't vague. It wasn't emotional. It was structured, a pattern, a system, a series of decisions made over time, and now, finally, it was visible, not just to me, but to someone who knew exactly what to do with it. And for the first time since this started, I felt something close to certainty, not about how it would end, but about one thing that mattered. More. I wasn't imagining any of it, and I wasn't going to carry it quietly anymore.
It took 4 months. 4 months of paperwork, calls, waiting, and a kind of patience I didn't know I had until I needed it. Nothing about the process was fast, and none of it was easy, but it moved forward steadily, consistently, because this time, everything was documented, everything had a record. The case didn't go to trial. It didn't need to. Once, Patricia presented the full timeline, the account access, the misrepresentation, the transfer, and the broader financial pattern we had uncovered. My parents' attorney advised them to settle. That decision told me more than any explanation ever could. The agreement was clear: full repayment of the $72,000, legal fees covered, a structured payment schedule enforced through the court, and a lien placed against my parents' house to ensure compliance. It wasn't dramatic. There was no confrontation in a courtroom, no final speech, no moment of emotional closure, just signatures, terms, consequences, separate from my case. Other things began to move. The information uncovered during the process, the other people involved, the financial pattern didn't stay contained. Complaints had already been made, and once everything was brought together, it became something larger than a civil matter. I wasn't directly involved in that part. I gave a statement once. After that, Patricia handled everything. The last update I received was brief. My father had entered a plea agreement, supervised probation, mandatory repayment to others affected, restrictions on any future financial dealings of a similar kind. My mother faced consequences to civil penalties tied to her role in the transfer. I didn't attend any of it. I didn't need to by then. I had already stepped out of that space. The first repayment came through on a Tuesday morning. I was sitting at my kitchen table, eating breakfast before work, when the notification appeared. For a moment, I just looked at it, then I went back to eating because something had changed. 4 months earlier, that number would have meant everything. Now, it was just part of a process. Important, yes, but not defining. The house I had planned to buy, the one I had built all of this savings for, sold before I got the money back. I drove past it once. The sign was gone. There were children's shoes on the porch, a bike leaning against the railing. Someone else's life had already started there. I sat in my car for a minute, then I left. And I wasn't as devastated as I thought I'd be, because over those 4 months, something else had taken its place. Clarity. The house had never just been about the property. It was about what it represented: stability, independence, something that belonged entirely to me. And I realized I could still build that, just not in the way I had originally imagined. A few weeks later, I found another place. Different neighborhood, slightly bigger, better light in the kitchen. The front door was green. I moved in on a quiet Saturday with Bree and a couple of friends helping me carry boxes up the steps. There was no tension, no unspoken expectations. No one asking for anything that wasn't freely given. My parents weren't there. That wasn't a scheduling conflict, that was a decision. And it felt right. People sometimes ask me if I regret taking legal action, if I feel guilty, if I think I went too far. I understand why they ask, but here's the truth. What happened wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't a one-time mistake. It was a choice, repeated, structured, and carried out with the expectation that I would accept it. And didn't I still love my parents? That hasn't changed. But love doesn't erase boundaries, and it doesn't require silence. What I built after that, the home, the life, the distance, it's mine in a way nothing has ever been before. Not because no one can reach it, but because now, I know exactly what I will and won't allow, and that makes all the difference. People expect a story like this to end with something. Dramatica. Final confrontation. A clear apology. A moment where everything fractures, or heals in a visible way. But real life doesn't always give you that kind of ending. What I got instead was something quieter. Space. After I moved into the new place, life didn't suddenly become easy. It just became mine again. Work continued. Early mornings at the hospital. Patients who needed help standing, walking, rebuilding. There was something grounding about that rhythm. Bodies don't lie the way people do. Progress there is simple. Better or not better. No ambiguity. At home, I started small. Unpacking boxes slowly. Choosing where things belonged instead of filling space out of habit. Cooking again, not because I had to, but because I wanted my kitchen to feel lived in. The green door became a strange symbol over time, not of victory. Not even of closure, just a boundary I could see from the outside world. Bree and I stayed close, closer than we had ever been. Before that, there was no need to perform roles anymore. No responsible one versus easy one. Just two adults who had grown up in the same house and finally understood it in the same language. Sometimes we talked about our parents, most of the time we didn't, and that balance felt healthier than any forced reconciliation could have been. As for my parents, contact became minimal. Formal, occasional, indirect through legal obligations and structured payments. There were no more emotional conversations, no attempts to rewrite what had happened into something softer. At first, that silence felt heavy. Then it started to feel neutral, and eventually, just normal. I learned something during that time that I didn't fully understand before. Distance is not the same as absence. You can love people and still step away from how they treat you. You can acknowledge where you came from without agreeing to continue the same cycle. And you can choose peace without requiring everyone else to participate in it. One evening, months later, I stood in my kitchen with the window open. The light came in at an angle, soft across the counter. The same kind of light I used to imagine in that first house I lost. I thought about it for a moment, and realized something unexpected. I didn't miss it the way I thought I would. Not because I didn't want stability, but because I had built something else in its place. Something no one could quietly take from me in a single decision, in a single conversation, in a single moment of misplaced trust. Not because I had hardened, but because I had finally learned the difference between trust and access, between family and obligation, between guilt and responsibility. There's a version of this story where I became bitter, another where I tried to fix everything, another where I gave in just to restore peace. But that's not what happened. What happened is simpler. I learned where the line was, and I kept it there. If there's one thing I would leave behind from everything that happened, it's this. You don't have to wait for a catastrophic moment to start protecting yourself. Sometimes the warning signs are small, repeated, familiar. And sometimes the most important decision you make is not what you take back, but what you refuse to lose again. Because once you see that clearly, you don't unsee it. And your life stops being something that can be quietly rearranged by other people. It starts becoming something you finally get to keep.